Church of the Brethren, we're grateful that you're here and able to hear the sermon. We're starting a new series called Love Where You Live. It's kind of, the Brethren have a slogan right now. It's called Jesus in the Neighborhood. That's kind of my version of Jesus in the Neighborhood. And we're going to talk about our neighborhood today. We're going to talk about connecting, and through the month of March leading up to Easter, we've got each sermon is going to, next one is on serving, and you'll get how they all go together. But anyway, this is our first one. I want to begin today by playing an audio clip, and you can watch the transcript of the audio clip of an accident that took place in Dallas, Texas, as a guy is observing this accident in front of him, and he's giving you a blow-by-blow description of what goes on. Listen to it.
Hey Mark, excuse me, I'm on my way to 3768. Kind of got hung up, it's raining out here. I'm on my way into Dallas. Jerry's probably going to be calling you to find out where I'm at if he can't get a hold of me, I'm sure. So thought, whoa, man, I just had a wreck right in front of me. This guy ran a red light and hit four old ladies in an Impala. Just kind of clipped them and turned them around right in front of me, man. That was close. Oh, now this guy's getting out of his car. He's got a white shirt on with a tie cigarette hanging out of his mouth. He's throwing his hands up there like it was their fault. Oh, hold on. He's going over to their window. She's rolling down the window. Oh man, I think she sprayed him with pepper spray, man. He's on his face and he's on his feet. She's beating him with an umbrella. The other women are getting out too. There's one woman with a little black purse. She's tomahawking him, man. She looks like a Sunbelt 20 horsepower jackhammer. We got another woman that's she's hitting him like he's got a cattle prod. Then she's got an umbrella. She's sticking it in his side. Oh, there's another one it's a little woman that looks like Mother Goose. She's beating him. She's got this huge big bag. She's beating him. She's got this huge big bag. It's huge. It's about the size of her. She's about 4 foot nothing. She hit him over the head. Everything went all over the place. Her Bible fell. She just hit him in the head with a Bible. She picked this Bible up and she lifted it way over her head. It was a hardback NVI version. They still beat the hell out of this guy. She picked his Bible up and raised it up above her head and just beating the guy. This guy's not getting up. They're still hitting him. The one with the little black purse is still pieces of it. Okay, he's up on the car. The little woman just beating him again with that big bag. He's running to his car. He's out of here. The little bitty Mother Goose woman. She's stuck into him and she's driving off. I wish you would have been here, man. This is too good.
How many of you have ever been symbolically beaten over the head with the Bible?
Symbolically and literally.
Literally, okay. You have a mental picture in your head of a Bible beat them over the head kind of person. If you poll the average person in America today who's outside of the church, they will say that's the way they view the church. Bible thumpers. Often they are viewed with judgmental and legalistic ideas. It's not altogether fair, but it's how people see the church, unfortunately. We live in the Bible Belt. I think it's still called the Bible Belt. It is to me anyway. Which 40 years ago, everyone in the Bible Belt was a Christian. Just the way it was. I grew up in California. I'm sorry to announce that to you. You may want to reconsider my salary and all the other things that go. No, I'm just, nothing about California. But I grew up in California. You either were a Christian or you weren't. That's the way it was. We were certainly not a Christian state. Not even then, not now. There are millions of Christians in California, though. We grew up in a time where we preached the Bible and didn't care much about the world. Back then, we didn't beat people over the head with the NVI. I like he called it the NVI Bible. It should be NIV, by the way. It was the King James Version that we beat them over the head with. We huddled up in our own holy little circles, in our groups. In fact, I can remember a time in the 70s when we were told by Christians to stop listening to anything that isn't Christian music. And they would say that rock music was of the devil. In fact, they would say, maybe you can remember those days, that if you could turn your record backwards, if you could play it backwards, that there were subliminal messages from Satan on your Bible and your record, and you should burn them or you should throw them away. And youth groups and churches all over the country were doing that. I'm telling you, my little RCA record player, I couldn't spin them backwards, so I never got the message from Satan. I'm just telling you. But that's how it was in the 70s. I didn't call it a radical statement, but I have a statement in the outline. If you have your outlines, I know you want to fill in the blanks. Here's the statement. The goal of the church is not to get away from the world, but we are to impact our world. The goal of the church is not to get away from the world, but we are to impact our world. That leads me to my first point, which simply is the goal of the church is to go into the world. The goal of the church is to go into the world. Mark 16:15, Jesus says, and he said to them, go into the world. And some translations will say, preach the gospel. Mine says, proclaim the gospel to the whole creation. And I can hear some of you say, well, Bob, that's talking about you. You're the preacher. He's talking about all the disciples. We are to go and proclaim the gospel. Jesus went on to say in Acts 1:8. And Acts 1:8 is actually the outline of the entire book of Acts. If you take that, what he says in Acts 1:8, and follow it through the book of Acts, you will see that's exactly how it goes. So here's what Acts 1:8 says. This is what he says to his followers. But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, that's where it began, and in Judea, that's where it went next, and then Samaria, and then to the ends of the earth, or your translation may say the utter ends of the earth. That's simple. He tells them to be witnesses, and that's letter A. We are to simply be witnesses. We are not to be witnessing, we are to be witnesses. Rick Warren says there are two things that you can do on earth that you cannot do in heaven. There are two things you can do on earth that you cannot do in heaven. The first one is sin, and the second one is you can tell people about Jesus. And then Rick Warren says, which one do you think he wants you to be doing? He doesn't want us to be sinning. He wants us to be telling them about Jesus. We are to be witnesses. All right, I'm going to give you a new term you've never heard before. It's letter B. The problem with us is gracism. That's a new word. I just made it up. Do you ever make up a word? Yeah, we all do those. Yep. So here's what gracism says. Gracism says, I need to slow down because I know you're filling in blanks and we're moving quickly. I'm sorry. Gracism says, I deserve to be with the Father more than you. I deserve to be with the Father more than you. So Jesus is traveling. He's got his disciples with him. And he comes upon a tax collector. Now, let me just tell you, a tax collector, we do have a tax collector in our church, and this is not describing Pastor Archie at all, okay? He's an ex-tax collector. He gave up that lifestyle. Okay.
And it was on 9/9 when I retired.
Is that right?
Yeah. What you going to read?
I am going to read it. Yes, Matt. Yep. So he's traveling and he comes upon a tax collector. A tax collector in that time was a sellout to the Jewish people. He sold his own people out to make more money for himself. The Chosen, the movie that's out, it's even out. You can watch episodes 7 and 8 if you want this afternoon at the movie theater there of that season. The Chosen does a wonderful job describing Matthew's character. He was a Jew, but he was a sellout to the Romans. And it was all about making more money. The Jews hated them so much that you read about them in the Bible, they have their own category of sin. The sinners and the tax collectors. They're in their own category. That's how bad they were. Because they ripped off the people. So Jesus tells a parable. In Luke 18, I want to read verses 10 to 13 in this parable. Luke 18, 10 to 13. 2 men went up into the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee, standing by himself, prayed thus, God, I thank you that I am not like other men, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week, I give tithes of all that I get. But the tax collector, standing far off, would not even lift up his eyes to heaven. But he beat his breast and saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. And then Jesus says, who do you think is justified before God? He was a scumbag, but at least he knows that he's a scumbag. A lot of discussion today about reaching lost people for Christ. We talk about it a lot, and I believe there's going to be a great spiritual harvest. But here's what I want to tell you. I think the people of the world are more ready to receive the good news than we are to give it to them. And that needs to change. Do you realize the number of missionaries who are coming from Africa to the United States to evangelize us? That's the crux of our ministry, reaching lost people, being a witness for Jesus. The tax collector knew they weren't worthy. We all know people in our lives who need to know God, who need to know Jesus. But they can't get through the bubble that we create to get to know Him. So here's something I want you to consider. It's not in your bulletin. I should have put it in there. But as you can see, you got a pretty full bulletin outline anyway. Listen to this. If you have space, you can write it down. I'll say it slowly. The farther a person is from God, say that again. The farther a person is from God, the more they realize they need God. The farther a person is from God, the more they realize they need God. When I read the story of the tax collector, there in Luke 18, you notice he stood at a distance. He didn't even feel worthy. He didn't even raise his eyes up. He just beat his breast and asked for mercy. Did you know a tax collector could not even come into the holy place at the temple? He didn't feel worthy, and he knew he was not worthy. Here's the problem. It's a problem for me. It's been a problem for a long time. That's the opposite of the way Jesus wanted it to be. A lot of churches in America today tell people, you need to clean up your act first, you need to cut your hair, you need to wear certain clothes, you need to dress this way, you need to speak this way, you need to believe this way, you need to carry this Bible and this Bible only. And we have this long list of things they got to do before they can even come in the door. That's not the way of Jesus. Jesus never did it that way. He said everybody's welcome to come in. I died for all of them, not just for a few holy people. Archie made mention of it. I want to quote Matthew 9:9. That's where we begin the encounter with Matthew. I want to begin. Okay, as Jesus passed on from there, he saw a man called Matthew sitting at the tax booth. And he said to him, "Follow me." And he rose and he followed him. That simply. All Jesus had to say was, "Follow me." He got up and followed him. He had a lot of money. He had a lot of wealth. But the one thing he needed more than anything else was Jesus. So I want to ask you, what do you think the disciples are doing while Jesus is having this encounter with Matthew? They're probably saying, "Jesus, beat him over the head with the Bible. Get your Torah out. Beat him." But Jesus simply says, "Follow me." And then the 12, it dawns on them, he's actually being asked to come and join us. Really? Him? That scumbag. He's coming with us. He's going to be a part of our group. I can hear them mumbling to themselves, "We don't want him hanging out with us." There's no record in the scriptures of what the conversation was like, but I can't think the disciples are very happy to have him be a part of the group. I mean, they may be lowly fishermen, but in their gracism scale, remember that word gracism, we deserve it more than you. By the way, we all have a gracism scale. Every one of us does. Even though we're fishermen, we are above the tax collector on the gracism scale. So I have in your bulletin, and I'll go slowly through this, I have made up for you what I think a gracism scale might look like. Okay? So first of all, at the top you have the Pharisee. If you're filling in your blanks, it's Pharisee. Then the second one would be the teacher of the law. The next one, teachers of the law. Next one would be doctors and nurses. Then normal people, whatever that means. That doesn't, none of us qualify for normal, by the way. Certainly not me. Fishermen or fisher women. We don't want to be sexist here at all. Sinners. Prostitutes. Tax collectors. Sinners, prostitutes, tax collectors. And finally, San Francisco 49er fans. You don't know, I had Texas Longhorn fans. I'm a Gator fan. I had Florida State, but you wouldn't understand that. Yeah, the Longhorn fan in the crowd is upset with me already. So I decided I would go neutral and go with the 49er fan. Just a little fun, folks. But we all have that scale. And as long as we're above you, we're better off. They don't want people below them hanging out with them. They were excited when Jesus said to Luke, why don't you come and join us? Because Luke was the doctor. But they're not so excited when Matthew is given the call. And I want you to know Jesus did not give Matthew a punch list of things he had to do first. That he had to change his life. He had to do this. He had to do that. Didn't tell him he had to give so much money. Didn't tell him he had to attend so many classes. He just said, follow me. That's all he said. He didn't say to him, we are Christians around here, Matthew, and we don't drink, smoke, or chew, and we don't hang out with people who do. He just said, follow me. You know what? He did that because he wasn't inviting him to a religion. He was inviting him to a relationship. He was inviting him to a relationship. But it gets worse for the disciples. Let's read verses 10 to 12. And as Jesus reclined at the table in the house, behold, many tax collectors and sinners came and were reclining with Jesus and his disciples. And when the Pharisees saw this, they said to this disciple, why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? But when he heard it, he said, those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. Not only has he invited Matthew to come follow him, Matthew is hosting him for a dinner in his house, a tax collector house. And guess what? The only people the tax collector knows are other tax collectors and sinners. And he says, bring your friends, bring them all. Jesus says, absolutely, bring your friends. It's the greatest day of his life. The one thing he needed more than anything else was Jesus. Because all the money in the world didn't give him purpose and meaning to life, but Jesus did. Like all sinners, the only people he knew were other sinners. So guess what he brought? He brought sinners. And Jesus went to a sinner party. Can you imagine the conversations now? Verse 10 talked about the tax collectors and the sinners are with him. Verse 11 to 12 is Jesus' response. But then he throws a dig in at the Pharisees, and I love it in verse 13. He says, "Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. For I came to call the righteous, not sinners." These Pharisees thought they knew everything. They knew everything you needed to know about the Bible. And Jesus says right up front, the goal is not to get all of the holy people together and put them in a holy box and separate them from the rest of the world. I'm here for the people on the outside. That's where Jesus spent most of his time, with the outcasts, the marginalized, the tax collectors, and the sinners. All right, point number 2. We are to be with the people farthest from God. We are to be with the people farthest from God. And then letter A. I want you to get that all written down. We are to be with the people farthest from God. Letter A. We are to be witnesses to even messy people. So Jesus tells another parable. It's found in Luke 14. I'm going to read verses 16 to 18, and then I'll read verses 21 to 23. But he said to him, "A man once gave a great banquet and invited many, and at the time for the banquet he sent his servant to say to those who had been invited, 'Come, for everything is now ready.' But they all alike began to make excuses. The first said to him, 'I bought a field and I must go out and see it. Please have me excused.'" And then he continues in verses 21 to 23. "So the servant came and reported these things to the master. Then the master of the house became angry, and he said to the servant, 'Go out quickly to the streets and the lanes of the cities, and bring in the poor and the crippled and the blind and the lame.' And the servant said, 'Sir, what you have commanded has already been done, and still there is more room.' And the master said to the servant, 'Go out into the highways and the byways and the hedges, and compel people to come in, that my house may be full.'" Now I want you to look around this morning. The house is not full. We got room for more people. And we got sliding doors that we can slide open for more people. He says, bring them all in. The broken, the hurting, the messy people. They all get a spot at the table. That's all of us, folks. They just don't want to admit that they're messy people. All of the people we know, everyone you know is invited to the table. Call me a crazy preacher, but I don't care what kind of sinner they are. They are all invited to the table. You could not be much lower in Jesus' day than a tax collector, and he invited Matthew to the banquet. So we should be with sinners today. I bet you don't hear that preached very often in churches. We should be with sinners. I want you to be with sinners. Here's the problem. I'm a pastor. And I spend most of my day hanging out with horrible sinners like Karen and Vaughn. I mean, how bad can it get, you know? All of the people I associate are already Christians. Do you realize by the time you've been a Christian for 7 years, most of your friends will all be Christian by that time? And you have to intentionally go out and find non-Christian friends. Jesus says, if we're going to be like him, we need to hang out with messy people. There's all sorts of messy people. I heard about a biker dude. His name was Marco, and it was like about 20 years ago when the big thing in the Christian world was WWJD, what would Jesus do, patches. So he was a biker, and every biker, you know, you got your leathers on and you got to put your patches on. Well, he found that patch and he put it on. And one day another biker said, "Oh, I like your WWJD." He said, "Yeah, I like it too, but I don't know what it means." He said, "It means, what would Jesus do?" He said, "Oh, I thought it meant we want Jack Daniels." We got all sorts of messy people out there. The biggest reason churches shy away from sinners and tax collectors is because they're messy. But Jesus came for the sick, and the church is supposed to be a hospital. That's why I lead a Bible study every Thursday in a bar. That's why I did jail ministry and led recovery groups. You cannot imagine the people that I have met in the last 15 years doing those ministries. For a period of time, I served as a mentor for the State Department of Corrections. And I would go to various prisons, and people would be getting out, and I would be their mentor, that when they came back to Garden City, I would help them acclimate and get connected with their parole officer and find jobs and homes and things like that. That was my job. So they called me and told me there was a guy named Leland at Ellsworth Prison. So I traveled up to Ellsworth and I met Leland and found out, of all things, he grew up in the same church I was a part of, Bible Christian. And he said, "I've played hide and go seek in places you don't even know there are in Bible Christian. My mom goes there, my family goes there." The second time I went up there to meet with him, the corrections officer introduced me to another person who happened to be there. His name was Sean. And he was getting out of prison soon, and he was going to be coming to Garden City as well. And he was going to live with some guy I did not know at the time named Ed Galloway. Yes, our Ed Galloway. That's long before I ever knew Ed, or long before he ever started coming to our church. This is back in 2015. So as I got talking to Sean that day in the prison, he told me that he was from Jacksonville, Florida. And I said, "Well, Brenda and I lived in Jacksonville, Florida for 7 years. We talked about this street and that street and all the different things in Jacksonville, and the jailer just couldn't imagine that we'd have to come all the way to Ellsworth to find two people that knew each other or knew a lot of things." He told me he was a Gator fan. I told him, "Guess what? I'm a Gator fan." So he said to me, he said, "I think I have met you." I said, "You have?" He said, "One day I was walking out of IHOP and I had this Gator jacket on, and you said to me, 'I have that exact same jacket.'" And here's a picture of him and me in our Florida Gator jackets. That was the day we watched Florida beat the Florida State Seminoles together. Eventually, Sean did come to Ed's house, and we began mentoring him. He joined our Celebrate Recovery group, and the guys that I was mentoring on Thursday night, we all met together. One day, Sean got permission to go see his girlfriend in New Mexico. Now, when you're on parole, you can't cross state lines, but she allowed him to go to New Mexico, and he went down to see her, and on the way back, he was involved in a car accident and was hospitalized in Amarillo with broken ribs, several broken ribs, and other broken bones. A week later, he said they're going to discharge me on Saturday, and Ed can't come down. Neither Ed or his son can come down. Can you come down and pick me up? I said, we'll get a couple of guys. We'll come down and pick you up. So here we are at the big Texan. Can we go to the next picture? So there's Richard, and you can see his arms in a sling, and our friend Kevin next to him. And I had to fight those guys to keep them from eating that 72-ounce steak because they knew the preacher was paying for it, okay? Now, I have permission to say this, so I'm going to tell you. Richard, you know. In fact, he's given his testimony here. I had the privilege of baptizing all three of those men, leading them to Christ. But I want to tell you, each one of them has a past. Each one of them has been in prison. Richard shared his story with us. And he told me the other day, next Monday, not tomorrow, next Monday marks 11 years, the day he walked out of prison and came to Garden City. Never to go back. That's a hallelujah, folks. You see, you never know who God is going to put in your life. When you start dealing with messy people, trust me, folks, we're all messier than we want to admit. We may think other people on that gracism list are messier than we are, but we are all broken people. We just are. So I want to ask you, and it's point B. We talk about in the Brethren Church about being Jesus in our neighborhood. Well, we need to know who is in our neighborhood, who is in our hood. So each one of you in your bulletin has a little insert. In fact, some of you had troubles hanging on to it. I've told several people, pick it up, it's falling on. It's one of those inserts. It looks like this. And you put your house in the middle of that. That's where you live. And then you find out, you describe or you write down who lives in the houses behind you or the houses beside you or those in front of you. If you live in an apartment, you make those adjustments. Do you know who your neighbors are? Some of you have lived there a long time. You might know everything about them. I am blessed. I have a pastor living right next to Brenda and I. In fact, he's preaching a few blocks from here at First Baptist Church. He preached in this church supply just before I became here, Don and Judy. And on the other side of our house, we have a 95-year-old Nazarene lady, wonderful, blessed lady. We live in the safest neighborhood in Garden. You want to live in a safe neighborhood? Come and live in our neighborhood. I am not exaggerating. I have a policeman right across the street. Next to Inez are 2 police cars parked every day next to us. Down the street, around the corner, is Old Lover's Lane. We got 2 more police cars. Got 5 police cars within a block and a half. I live in the very safest neighborhood. Now, I realize I just said something that some of you online who aren't from Garden City don't have a clue what I'm talking about. Yes, we do have a street in Garden City called Old Lover's Lane. And I've got a few single people in our church who are trying to find New Lover's Lane. We do have a street called Old Lover's Lane. We have 5 police officers, literally, within just a stone's throw. You need to know who your neighbors are. I love this quote from C.T. Studd. Some wish to live within the sound of a chapel bell. I want to run a mission a yard from the gates of hell. Listen to that again. Some wish to live within the sound of a chapel bell. I want to run a mission a yard from the gates of hell. That's what we're supposed to be about. You can't love where you live if you don't know where you live. If you think one of your neighbors may not be a Christian, does not know God, that's why Jesus put you there. To be a witness. So here's our conclusion. It's very simple. The mission, if you choose, I really like Mission Impossible. Love that, growing up watching that. The mission, if you choose to accept it, is to be a witness for Jesus. That's simple. The mission, if you choose to accept it, is to be a witness for Jesus. God has called us to love where we live, to connect with the people in our neighborhood. We're going to sing a song.